Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a pretty fascinating world today, the modern trading card market. This used to be just a simple childhood hobby, right? Tucking cards into bicycle spokes. But man, has it evolved. We are talking about a massive, highly professionalized alternative asset class. It's an ecosystem that literally rivals fine art and precious metals now, but it comes with its own incredibly specific science, economics, and psychology. Our sources give us this amazing insider look at how this space actually operates. So let's dive right in and explore how it all works.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, the new gold standard. Second, finding undervalued hidden gems. Third, the science of grading. Fourth, calculating your grading ROI. And finally, mastering global card marketplaces. Okay, let's dive into this.
Section 1. The new gold standard. To really grasp where the card market is at today, we have to rewind just a bit to the 2020 COVID boom. This was a massive turning point. We saw over $500 million of highly efficient capital just flood right into the hobby. It completely transformed the whole scene, from this niche little community into a very serious global financial market.
Just to give you an idea of the sheer financial weight we're talking about here, think about the number 12.6 million. Back in 2022, a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, graded at a PSA in 9, sold for a record-shattering $12.6 million. That is wild. We definitely aren't just talking about cardboard anymore. We are dealing with high-end alternative assets.
But here's a critical dynamic you need to understand. Because of that massive influx of capital and the fact that the vintage market is largely unregulated, there's a huge asymmetry of information. As our sources point out, new investors are often the exit liquidity for sophisticated dealers. In the hobby, a novice who gets taken advantage of is called a fish, and nobody wants to be the fish, right? So think of this explainer as your insider playbook. We're going to arm you with the data and strategies you need to operate safely instead of becoming someone else's payday.
Which brings us to Section 2, finding undervalued hidden gems. Let's see how all this history builds into an actual, actionable strategy. Because finding those undervalued cards, it really isn't about blind luck. It's a calculated, repeatable discipline.
At the absolute core of this discipline is a concept known as grading arbitrage. And honestly, this is one of the most profitable strategies in the entire hobby. Basically, it involves buying raw, ungraded cards that look pristine, sending them off to a grading company, and then turning around and selling that newly authenticated, highly graded card for a massive profit. It all relies on what's called the gem mint multiplier. That's where the jump in value from, say, a grade 9 to a perfect grade 10 isn't just a tiny step up, it's exponential. It's pretty fascinating. You are quite literally turning raw cardboard into certified gold.
So how do we actually find these raw cards on the cheap? Well, most people search eBay way too specifically. They'll type in something like 2021 Topps Chrome Shohei Ohtani PSA 10 Refractor, but doing that just dumps you right into the most competitive part of the market. Instead, you want to run broad searches using 5 exact steps. First, search just the player and the year. Second, filter it to auctions only. Third, set a 1-bid minimum. This helps you find the overlooked items. Fourth, exclude graded cards altogether so you're only looking at raw inventory. And fifth, sort by ending soonest. By keeping things generic, you completely bypass that hyper-efficient market and stumble onto mislabeled, underpriced cards from inexperienced sellers who might not even know exactly what they have.
Now, don't get me wrong, automated pricing tools like market movers or Beckett's lists are incredible for spotting price drops, but they are really just the starting point. You absolutely must manually verify your finds. Think of this as your required checklist. You need to cross-check about 10 to 15 recent sold listings to find the true median price. You've got to inspect high-resolution images super closely because a card that looks flawless in a tiny thumbnail might have fatal flaws up close. You also need to confirm the exact parallel, figure out if that price dip is just temporary, and definitely check the seller's feedback. This manual verification, this is exactly what separates a highly profitable buy from a very, very expensive mistake. Section 3. The science of grading. Okay, so once you've scored your raw card, we hit the climax of the flip, grading. A lot of folks out there think grading is totally subjective, but as we'll see, it is actually rooted in physical science.
Let's talk about the geometry of value. Centering is the most visible flaw on any card, and it is strictly mathematical. For a card to score a perfect PSA 10, the centering on the front can be no worse than a 60-40 ratio between the image and the border. But you really have to watch out for optical illusions like tilt, where the image is just slightly rotated inside its frame. Your naked eye can easily be tricked by that.
That is exactly why the pros use grid overlays to measure centering precisely before they ever submit a card. You also have to really understand the physics of the specific card stock you're evaluating. For instance, if you're looking at vintage paper cards, pre-1980 stuff, your main enemies are structural paper wrinkles, which act like tiny fault lines and immediately cap your grade at a 5. And then there's foxing, which is incredibly actually bacterial growth on the card. Crazy, right? On the flip side, if you're dealing with modern chrome cards, they're usually pretty tough on the corners but incredibly vulnerable on the surface. You're hunting for microscopic surface haze, little printing dimples, or deep scratches that will instantly ruin the grade.
So when it's finally time to send that card off, keep this in mind. Sending every single card to just one grader is a quick recipe for bankruptcy. You have to match the specific type of card to the grading company's market fit. PSA is the absolute market king. They consistently yield the highest ROI on resale. BGS, on the other hand, is the technical standard. They're known for their subgrades and thicker slabs, which makes them perfect for thick, autographed patch cards. Then you've got SGC, the Vintage Authority. Their black tuxedo slabs just look amazing on older cards. And finally, CGG, which totally dominates the trading card game market, for things like Pokémon and Magic the Gathering.
Moving on to Section 4, calculating your grading ROI. This is where we step away from the cardboard itself and get into the cold, hard mathematics of the flip. It is absolutely critical that you never, ever grade based on emotion.
So, I want to pose this question to you. When does a slab actually add value? Novice collectors often have this gut instinct to grade every single shiny card they pull from a pack. But the reality? A slab only really adds value in a very narrow set of circumstances. We're talking specifically about key rookies, low population cards, or vintage cards where the condition is really uncertain. The crucial point here is that you absolutely have to run an expected value, or EV calculation, before you spend a single dime. Let's break down a mock EV calculation together. Say a PSA 10 version of your card sells for $200. Based on your really careful forensic inspection, you estimate a 55% chance, that's your gem rate, of actually getting that perfect 10. Then, you factor in the PSA 9 value, let's say $80, for the remaining 45% chance. Subtract your grading and selling fees, which run about $43 here, and boom, your expected profit is just $41. Using this mathematical formula forces you to account for the realistic probabilities, not just your absolute best-case scenario. And because of that math, a very clear rule of thumb emerges. It's one you should always remember. Do not grade modern cards worth under $30 raw, period. The grading fees, the shipping, the selling costs, they will just completely destroy your profit margin. Plus, you have to factor in opportunity cost. A card that's locked up at PSA for 30 to 90 days, that is capital you can't redeploy into other flips.
And that brings us to Section 5, Mastering Global Card Marketplaces. You've sourced it, verified it, and graded it. Now, where do you actually sell it? Well, it's pretty fascinating to see how drastically your choice of platform impacts your bottom line. Just think about the varying fee structures out there. Vintage charges 0% in seller fees, 0, which makes it absolutely incredible for low to mid-value cards over in Europe. Card Market takes about 5% and is heavily focused on trading card game singles. Todo Colección sits around 8 to 10% and dominates vintage Spanish collectibles. Meanwhile, eBay charges the most, around 10 to 13%, but it gives you the absolute best global liquidity for high-value and graded slabs. Taking a 0% fee versus a 13% fee completely changes your flip margins, so matching the card to the right marketplace is just absolutely essential.
Now, the most sophisticated flippers out there, they take this a step further with cross-platform arbitrage. First, they list their inventory simultaneously across multiple platforms to get maximum exposure. Second, they use tracking tools to monitor pricing gaps between markets. For instance, they might buy a card that's underpriced on Card Market in Europe and then flip it for a higher price on TCG Player in the US. And third, they have very strict systems in place to remove a listing instantly when it sells somewhere else, just to avoid the nightmare of double selling.
So we've covered the transformation of the market, the discipline of the hunt, the rigorous science of condition, the cold math of expected value, and the strategy behind marketplace matchmaking. After all that, I want to leave you with one provocative question to ponder. You have the data. Are you collecting or are you investing? Because true profit in this space requires leaving that childhood nostalgia at the door and treating the hobby as a highly calculated, disciplined business. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy hunting out there.